Uh, so today we're gonna be doing an introduction to ZBrush. So right off the bat, when you kind of open up ZBrush, you should be seeing this exact same layout. So in here we have the light box. So the light box is kind of the ZBrush library where you have your brushes, tools, textures, alpha, material, noise, fibers, arrays, grid, document, render sets, filters, quick saves, spotlights, and whatnot. So depending on what you're trying to create or what you are already creating, you might at some point still need to come to the lightbox, kind of select or use assets in your project. Like for example now, let's say you want kind of working on your model and want kind of use a particular set of downloaded brushes offline. So you need to kind of install them into ZBrush, and the way to kind of install ZBrush brushes or alpha or IMM is as simple as going to the program files. Let me just show you guys an example. So most of what we have in here, if not all of what we have in our lightbox are in the program files of ZBrush. So if I go to my local disks, hold on. If you install it in your 64 bits, if you install in 64-bit setup, you should have your setup in program files, and 32 bits you should have them in program files brackets open bracket x86 close bracket. So 64 bit should be in this. So I'll open this up. So I'm still using a later version of ZBrush. So I'm using the ZBrush 2020. So you might be using a much earlier or newer version. So if you're using a newer version, because it's now owned by Maxon, so you should be having a different name for the setup in there. So I'm still using the version where they were still called Pixology. So I'll just drag this down to Pixology, then ZBrush 2020. Okay, so you notice in here now that you have the ZBrush Alpha. So whichever alpha you download there, you just have to come into the ZBrush Alpha, and then you just paste that particular folder in here, and that particular folder should be appearing in your lightbox when you go to the ZBrush Alpha. Same also with brushes. Same also with ZBrush brushes. So you find them in here also, ZBrushes. So whatever ZBrush you kind of brush for, whichever brush that is specific for ZBrush that you download there, you can kind of use them in here. Just import them in here and you should be good to go. So that's for that. So if I go to let's go to Alpha. I have some preloaded or pre-installed alphas in here. So if you have any pre-installed alpha, like I just showed you how to bring them in, you should have them you should have them appearing in here. Same also with the brush or whatsoever other tools you have brought into the program files for ZBrush, should have them appearing in here in their specific folder. So there are also some default ones. There are also some default tools also in here. Like for example, we have some default tools in here that we use. Like for example, we have the demo head in here. We also have this demo soldier in here. So this is under project. So under project, you should have some already made out project that you can just kind of bring into ZBrush and then start working on them. Just show you guys that they are actually in there in case you want to kind of work with them. So I'll click on this light button and select that just to remove that. So I will not be talking about the entire tool in the entire layout. I'll just be talking about most of the specific tools I use for my projects, whether for hard surface or for organic sculpting or modeling. So in here we have our new user interface. For Maya, that's been called workspace, but here we have it's actually called new user interface layout. So depending on what you want to kind of create, it just kind of change the interface generally. It's not kind of specific to maybe hard surface modeling or human or organic modeling or whichever kind of project you want to kind of recreate specifically. So it just more or less like UI UI in there. So if I click on this, just kind of change the UI. Same here also, if I click on this also changes the UI. So most specifically, most of the time I'm kind of in this workspace, or rather in this layout most of the time, because I have some kind of basic setup of brushes down here with also materials also. So most of the time I find myself using this default layer. I'm sure some people will be using some customized layer for their workflow, but it all boils down to personal preference of the artist. So now in this blank canvas, now if we try to kind of create something in here, we just have this kind of sporadic, blob-like, not so appealing creation in here. And the reason why this is like so is because this is more or less like a 2.5D layout. So we're not yet in the 3D layout yet. It's not yet. So to kind of clear this out, all you have to do is to click on the Control N on the keyboard, Control N on the keyboard, to kind of clear the canvas. So now if you want to kind of create something more specific in here, all we have to do is just to either we can either come in here, to the tools and just double click on any of these projects just to open up these pre-existing projects, or we can just create from something from scratch, something default in here. So I select this cylinder 3D and I drag this out here. Now if you notice, let's say we try to pan around this, you can't pan around this, you can't zoom in around this, you can't do basically navigations in here, basic navigations in here. Why? Because this is just a flat 2D canvas. So let's say we want to convert this into a 3D canvas that we can actually move, navigate, pan, and do whatever basic navigations we want to do in here. Now, to do that, we need to let's start by clearing the canvas, Ctrl N, and create a new one in here. Then click on Edit, Objects, or you can hit the T on the keyboard. Here also, putting your mouse cursor on the layout, on the icon rather, allows you to kind of see the shortcut for it. So click on Edit. Now we can actually move around here. So if you're using your light pen, you can just easily move around here like so. But the movement is just stuck on just one axis though. So it's more or less like orbiting around this. So basically orbiting around this. So to kind of pan on this, you have to hold down the Alt key. Your mouse cursor still on your hand still on the Alt key and hold. Then you can move this left or right, up or down. This is just to pan around this. Okay, but now to kind of zoom in and out, you hold down the Alt key. Be on an empty on the empty space. Make sure on the empty space with your light pen still directly in contact with your tablet. Then you kind of release the Alt key. So you kind of let go of the Alt key. With the mouse cursor, with your pen still directly in contact with your tablet, not releasing it. Then you can now kind of zoom in and out like so. So you can see, yeah, it takes a while. It takes a while to get used to or to get familiar to. So, but alternatively, you can also do the same thing around here. So in here we have the frames. So I click on this. I will actually kind of bring this into our view. And I believe the shortcut for this is also F. So if you hit the F key on the keyboard, that will kind of frame into the selected sub tool. Okay. So alternatively, we can also come in here to move the objects. But this doesn't particularly moves the objects. Doesn't particularly moves the object. If you want to actually move the object itself, then you might need to go to the use the gizmo here in here, use move. This just basically does that kind of pan across your canvas. Then you have the zoom and zoom in and out. Then we have the rotate. You can rotate around this. Okay. Then we have poly frame. So the poly frame it kind of allows us to kind of see. It's more like ZBrush's own way of kind of giving ID color maps to different section of your model. In regards to if you want the UVs to have a different color ID, or you want the color ID on each section to be kind of separated out, depending on how you want to do. There's a full option for that in here. It's called polygroup. So, but now it's not completely visible in here because there's one more thing we need to do before we start getting more options in here to kind of use to kind of work with this model. So yes, to kind of work with this model. But once I click on this now, you might not really see much of what's happening in there. Let's kind of change the material a bit more. So I'll just come in here. Instead of using this matte red wax material, let's try a blink material instead. So clicking on this kind of allows us to see the polyframe. The polyframe is actually in there, but the color is actually on white right now. So I'm also going to talk about that a bit more later on. So click on this transparency. The transparency will not be completely active until we have a secondary object or a secondary subtool in here or behind this. So for now, we only have just one subtool in here, so that's why it's not completely visible. So let's say we want to kind of have some more options in here to kind of work with. Alternatively, also you can also use some variations of default materials in here. We have the matte cap green. We also have the default gray. And if you notice, we still have our poly frame turned on. With our poly frame turned on, we can see the vertex, the edge, and the faces. If I turn this off, we can only see just this gray shaded version of it. So now let's kind of bring out some more options for this. So come in here and we'll click on make polymesh 3D. So as soon as you hit this, just notice in here some more options will kind of drop out in here. You can see some more options kind of dropping out in here. Okay, so back to this poly frame we have in here. So now you can see this having a separate or different color to it. And we have a particular specific menu for that. So on this we have the auto group. So now we can't really see much until we add another object in here. But let's say we kind of click on UV group, auto group, merge group, straight. There's a lot of options in here, which while we're kind of working with some other specific project, we might come in here and then kind of touch up on some of this. So though for the most part you might not really be needing all of this though. The major ones I kind of use is this group by normals. So this particular one will actually work. So I click on this now. So it's kind of look at this from a 45-degree angle. I think yes, 45-degree angle in here. I kind of give those angles separate polygroups. Okay, I'm gonna give that separate polygroups. But before we kind of touch up more of what we have in here, let's just take a look at this subtool menu in here. Let's look at the subtool menu in here. So the way ZBrush kind of works is slightly different from other software that you may have already noticed. Starting from the layout, you're kind of having something completely different from your normal, regular, traditional softwares. So coming in here to the sub tool, so this sub tool is more or less like our outliner in ZBrush. This is where we have any object we kind of create to kind of show itself in here. But you need to keep in mind that each canvas, or rather, yes, each canvas, depending on the particular project you're on, you kind of have different subtools for it. It's more or less like having like different kind of, let's call it different documents. Yes, let's call it different documents inside of one project. So we have this particular document in here. In this document in here, we have this PM 3D cylinder 3D in here. So if you click on another document, this is another document, this polymesh 3D. Let's click on this. This is a completely different document. Well, now in this particular document, in our subtool manager, we only have just this star in there, this polymesh star in there. But coming down here, click on this particular one, we only have this cylinder 3D in here. So yes, you guessed right. So you can basically have different documents with different subtools, different documents and different subtools doing different things. For example, now in here, you can have a particular character model in here, maybe a male character model in here. Then in the different documents, you can also have maybe a female character in here. You're also working on a female character in here. So you can basically have as many documents as you want. I don't know if there's a limit to this though, but for the general idea is that you can actually work on different documents on the same ZBrush project. Okay. So most of these settings in here that I find myself not happening to go to kind of use most of these settings in here all the time though, except for some specific things, which, for example, under this texture, you might find yourself working in here when you're kind of exporting out textures or creating or kind of importing textures in here. Then tools, these tools is what we already have in here already. This is what we have in here already. Then we have the transform. Some of the transform, I'm sure you're already familiar with this move, scale, rotate, which you already have in here. Some of this you already have in here. Then the polyframe should be, you can see the polyframe in here also. But for the most part, most of what you will need, depending on the default user interface you're working with, you should have most of them, or the most important one kind of arranged out in this layout here, in your ZBrush layout. So you might not necessarily need to all the time go all the way to some of these tools and then use them. Also, most of what you'll be working with also, you find them around here also. So there are actually a lot of options in here. And these options in here, you won't find them up here. So what you have around here are for the menus you have around here are very specific to some particular things, and you won't find like 80% of them in here. So you should be having something completely different in this menu around here. So keeping that in mind, but while working on projects, you find yourself kind of using some of these tools in here, unlike what you would be using around here. Alright, so just a brief explanation on that, on this document. So alternatively also, let's say we want to have this star. We want to pick up this star from this document and then use it in this particular document. So how do we do that? So select the star. All you have to do is just to come in here and click on copy to. Then you come to the star project and you can use the paste tool. But you notice now that it's not working. The reason why it's not working is because it's creating a new document for you. So a more preferable way to kind of have that appear in here. So yeah, I actually did that. I think I did that. Yes, I did that wrong. I'm not supposed to do this particular one. This particular one is actually specific for copying and pasting documents. Let me go back in here and then show you guys a better way to do this. So if you come in here to the sub tool, you can, yes, this is the thing here. So use copy, then come to this document and we can use paste. Yes, it's working now. So now you have these two sub tool for this particular style sub tool from a different document being pasted in this documents for this 3D cylinder. So it's kind of inside the 3D cylinder. So now if we use our transparency, we can actually see that in there now. So using our transparency, we can actually see that in there. And depending on the sub tool that is selected, we can also kind of isolate them. So solo mode is we kind of isolate that particular selected sub tool. We can only see this particular sub tool in here, which any other one that is not selected is no longer visible. So you select this now, it's kind of switch to the particular sub to your own to kind of actually select or kind of isolate that. So it's actually called solo mode in ZBrush. So let me turn that off. Let's turn off. Now the reason why you can't see it properly because this polyframe is turned on. That's why the transparency is not completely obvious. It was actually in there, but it's not completely obvious. Let's turn off this polyframe. I believe the share. You can also see the shortcut for the polyframe also. It's called this Shift F. So you click on Shift F on this. Should have our polyframes in here. Okay, so let's turn on the transparency. That is one way of doing that. So alternatively, if you want to bring in other objects in here, you can also do this by clicking on Append. You can click on Append. You can also append subtools from other documents into this actual document. Let's say for example now, let's say for example now in this particular document, I did something like, let's say I replaced, let's say I did something like, okay, better still to be more precise, I'll go to the light box and I'll just double click on this demo edge. So double clicking on that demo head now kind of create a new document for us. So now we have a new document for us with everything that has to do with this demo head project in there in the own specific sub tool. So let's say for example now I go back to this cylinder 3D documents and I want to kind of have, or rather if without using the copy and paste, we want to kind of add this demo head in this same document. All we can do is just come into this sub tool menu and click on append. So this append will kind of show you sub tools from other documents also. So if I click on this now, I can append this in here. So you can see how it is added this head model in here. So that append will kind of show you different sub tools. It should show you the sub tools inside a different document to be precise. It basically show you sub tools inside another document. So selecting this now, but you hide, turn off this eyeball, kind of hide every other thing. Now we can actually see this. You can see. Also keeping in mind that I had this particular demo head selected. So if I kind of select this eye now, you can see how the preview changes. You can see how the preview for this document actually changes. So if I select this eyes now, you can see the preview actually changes. So if you go back to this particular document with the cylinder in there and click on append, you can see how based on what is actually selected in a different document, you can actually append that to this new document now. So let's click on that. Click on that now, we have this in here. You can see how we can kind of append or bring in objects from other documents into a specific document that we want them to be in. Okay, I believe I kind of run through that. So alternatively also you can also import objects from your file manager. Let's say for example you want to import a particular object to this. Okay, before we do this, before we do that, let's say for example now we save this. Let's say for example now we want to save this file or these documents or to CSS. So to do that, just click on Ctrl S to kind of save this out. So this is kind of save as a ZBrush project. Keep that in mind. This is kind of save as a ZBrush project. And this ZBrush project is kind of specific to the particular version you're using. So if you're using, so if I'm using an earlier version, maybe a newer version, and I save this as a ZBrush project, and I save it and I save this as a ZBrush project in a newer, let's say version 2022, and then I try to bring in this project into this version 2020. There's a chance that it might not work. There's a chance that it might not work. So a better way to kind of save in a more universal format for ZBrush. Though most of the time you might find yourself still saving in this ZBrush with this ZBrush project, in this format of ZPR. That's completely fine. So long you'll be opening the same projects in the same version, that's completely fine. Or maybe in an earlier version, that will still work. But a more universal way to kind of save this, in case you want to kind of send this out to various versions of ZBrush, and then it will work just fine. So to do that, all you have to do is just to use, I believe, yes, you just have to use this save as in here from this your two menu in here. Use the save as. So this particular one will save in a different format. This will actually save in a format called Z2. This saving it. You can see that the format is different. .ztl. So this particular format is going to work for whichever version of ZBrush you're actually using. So if you want to kind of extend this out to a client somewhere else that you're not too sure which particular version of ZBrush is using, so it's best to kind of save this as ZTL file. That would be a better way or preferable universal way to kind of save this out. Save this out as. So let's say we kind of save this out as this, but I won't be saving this though, just to give you a broad explanation on that. So it's kind of load up a tool. This particular load tool actually allows you to only load up ZTL files. You can load up a ZPR file in here, a ZBrush project file in here. You can only load up ZTL files. So let's say we add some external ZTL files in here. So let's say I'm going to load this doc in here. So you can just click on this and click open. So this kind of load up into the same projects. So this kind of load up into the same projects. So you can see I created his own project in here, or rather his own document in here. So obviously in different documents. So we click on this demo head. This demo head has his own document also. This demo head you created from the lightbox has its own project document also. This doc we just loaded in this doc now from this load tool. And this particular doc projects, or this particular doc is a ZTL format. So it's actually kind of loaded into a separate document inside ZBrush projects. I don't know if that makes sense. I'm sure it does. Just take your time to kind of go through this video again and kind of understand what I'm trying to explain. So thank you. I'm sure you get the idea for that. So yes, carrying on. Okay. So yes, that's for that. So let's say for example now let's see another this is by no means a full complete ZBrush introduction that kind of explains the entire tool in here. Just kind of get you started on kind of understanding what actually goes on in here. Is for most of the tools you should be using in here. Let's just work with this particular dog instead. So let's click on this polyframe to remove the polyframe for this. So let's say we're going to work with some of these sculpting tools in here, starting with the standard brush. So if you come in here and kind of try this in here, you should have something appearing in here like so, but you can see now it's not so defined. Based on the subdivision level you have on this might give you a finer sculpt, a cleaner sculpt, or a more rough kind of blobby kind of sculpt in there, depending on the subdivision level you have in there. And also we're not sculpting this on symmetry, so it's kind of turn off symmetry. Let's undo this for now. It's kind of turn on symmetry and kind of sculpt on this. You can hit the X key on the keyboard, so that kind of put us into symmetry mode. Kind of have this sculpted into sculpting in symmetry, or kind of get us sculpting symmetrically rather. So something like this should be fine. So now let's say we want to kind of have a more final sculpted details in there. So we need to kind of add more subdivisions to this. So notice for now the active point for this is, the active point actually means this particular selected subtool. So the active point for this is 8,000. Let's say 8,000 points. So, but for the entire yes, 8,000 points. But for the entire document, for this particular document, because we only have just one object in here, you see the same 8,000. But if you kind of do an append, let's append. Let's just append a sphere in here. You can see how this total points now has increased based on this new subtool we just added into this document. So keeping that in mind, so you kind of understand what this active point is and what this total point is also. Okay. So before we kind of jump to kind of using some of these tools, let's just do a brief let's just do a brief introduction to some of what we have in here. So it's kind of use your gizmo to kind of move this selected subtool. You can select the move, just hit W on the keyboard for move, E for scale, and R for rotate. The same thing we have also in Maya. So with this now I can scale this in. So something a bit more different in ZBrush is that once you kind of bring in the gizmo, it kind of shows you both the scale, the rotate, and the translate tool all in one particular selected or activated tool in here. So now we can also move this around. Same here also, we can also scale this. You can also scale this way, squash this way, however we want. So you can actually do a lot more than just the selected or specific tool in here. Like for example, now in here we have this move tool activated. Okay. So let's say for example now, let's just talk about some of what we can do with this gizmo. Let's say for example now I kind of, because sometimes when working with this now, we can have this gizmo somewhere else. So to kind of manipulate this gizmo, just hold the Alt key. Then you can actually manipulate or move this gizmo separately from the object itself. But to kind of center this back into the object, all you have to do is to hold down the Alt key. Hold down the Alt key and then you select this map icon. So this particular icon actually does, what this icon actually does is to go to a mark center. It's more or less like your center pivots in Maya. So I'll click on this. So if also want to kind of make sure this gizmo is kind of oriented directly on the model, you can also hold down Alt and click on reset orientation. Click on this to kind of reset the orientation. So hold Alt and click on this, so that kind of reset this like so. Alright, so we can also alternatively move this with this square-ish edges around this. Okay, so that's for that. So now to go out of this, all you have to do is just go back to the draw mode. You can just hit the Q letter on the keyboard, kind of go to draw mode. Okay. So now if you notice now that this is not directly on the center anymore. So I click on the X, hit the X key now, go to symmetry mode. You can see how this is not perfectly symmetrical anymore. So if I kind of try to stop something around here, it's not perfectly symmetrical anymore. Why? Because we kind of move this off the center point of this canvas. So, but if you want to kind of force this to kind of force the symmetry to kind of be on the center of the object, all you have to do is just to come in here and click on local symmetry. Just click on local symmetry now. You kind of have this symmetrically working symmetrically on the object. So long that object is kind of off this center point of our grid. To kind of see the center point of our grid, we will just come in here and click on floor. Once click on floor now, you can see the grid line in here. You can see how this shows us the center point of this canvas, and our dog sub tool is actually on the center point of this canvas. So that's why with this particular local symmetry turned off, we can sculpt symmetrically on this dog. Now what kind of select this dog? You can either come in and select the dog by selecting the particular sub tool in here, or we can just hold Alt and tap on this sub tool. That will kind of jump us to this particular the dog sub tool in here. So now this kind of make this our active sub tool to also kind of sculpt details in there. You can see how we can sculpt this now in here symmetrically. If we turn this on, this will also work symmetrically because it is actually still on the center point of our floor. But if we have this moved out to the center point of our floor, like this particular sphere is now, this sphere is no longer in the center point of our floor. So sculpting details on this now without local symmetry turned on will just be off. So right, so just to get that out of the way. So now this particular one is more specific for painting. We won't be talking about that now. But for this sub Z hard and Z sub, what that actually does is that let's go back to this modeling here. And let's subdivide this dog. Let's add some more subdivisions to this. So we have more resolution to work with. So I'll divide this. You can see how this active point has been changed now to has been increased from 8 to 31,000. That's because this, when you subdivide once, it's kind of multiply that your initial subdivision level by 4. Okay, so now to kind of go down, we can actually scrub down through on this. But a more shorter way to kind of do this is just to, once you're on the lowest subdivision level, if you hit D on the keyboard, it's gonna jump us to the highest subdivision to move to the next level, to the next higher level. But if you want to drop this down to the next lower level, the shortcut for this is Shift D. Kind of drop this down. Let's take this up and let's add a few more to this. So now we have 4 subdivision levels to this. Okay. So yes. So now with this standard brush, let's see if we can sculpt something with the standard brush in here. Let me kind of isolate this. Model in here and turn off this floor. Don't be seeing that floor. When I come to documents, this range, I'll just take this range down just to have the background a bit faded out, like so. Let's say I want to continue kind of sculpting in here. We can take down the brush size. This is the brush size. Now this focal shift is the, I don't know if you guys can see this. Also, if you a faster way kind of go to some of these tools in here, if you hit the space bar, hit the space bar and hold it down. You can see this focal shift. This focal shift is like, you can see how we have two, with these red lines, you can see how we have two red circles on this. So the outer circle is our brush size, and the inner circle is the focal shift. So the focal shift is more or less like a fade effect for the intensity of the brush. So if you kind of increase this now, you can see how the focal shift inside the inner red circle is kind of shrunk in. If I increase this now, you can see how this inner circle now is almost the same size with the outer circle. So Let's see the effect for the two of these. But for now, let's put this back to 0. Now we're on standard brush. So with the standard brush, you can just draw out something like this. You can see the effect of that. So let's say we kind of increase the vocal shift all the way to 100, and we redo that. You can see how this is different. You can see how instead of having something a bit more faded around the edges, you can see how it becomes quite sharp. You can see how that makes this quite sharp. Alternatively, let's go to the opposite side and do this instead. You can see how this gives a much different effect to it. You can see how the effect is different now. So depending on how you want to, for the most part, you might be working or using this. You might be working or using this as a focal shift of default value in there for each particular brush you're using. So just to keep that in mind. So now we also have the intensity of this brush. So depending on what you set for the vocal length and the brush size, I'm sure you kind of get the right answer for this intensity. This kind of shows you or tells you how strong the effect of this brush should be. So if I should have this all the way to 860, so I have this like so. If I put this all the way to, let's say, 4, you can see it's barely even obvious in there. So each particular brush also has its own different kind of effects. But now we notice that, let's go back to the standard brush. We'll notice that this is on Z add now. It's kind of adding on top of this sculpt. If we put this on Z sub, just kind of goes, let's increase the brush, let's increase the intensity a bit more. Just kind of go inside the model instead. More or less like positive and negative values. So this would be like the Z add is like the positive value to bring out, the Z sub is like negative value to kind of subtract. It's more or less like addition and subtraction. Okay, so but alternatively, you can always leave this as it is. To kind of alternate or move in between these two while sculpting without having to come in here and click on Z add and Z sub, Z add, Z sub. Alternatively, you can just hold down the Alternatively, you can just hold down the Alt key. Yes, that makes sense. That makes sense, doesn't it? Actually makes sense. So add, hold down the Alt key. Now you can subtract from that. Add, hold down the Alt key. Now you can subtract from that. As you can see. So another way to kind of, let's say you want to kind of smooth this out. The first way of smoothing this out without having to go to the smooth brushes to hold down the shift key. If you notice in here, the brush has kind of changed in here. If you hold down the shift key, we can kind of smooth this out. So more or less, we're kind of creating some kind of rib cage for this particular dog character, as you can see in there on both sides. So depending on the intensity of the brush also, you can also smooth that with a particular intensity to it. But I'm going to make mention of something that is quite important, that you need to kind of understand why kind of sculpting on your model. So depending on the subdivision level you are on, depends on that greatly affects how your brush intensity is affecting the model. So let me undo most of this. So if you notice now that if I hold down the shift key to go to smooth mode with an intensity of 100, you can actually smooth this a bit faster, depending on the subdivision level we are on. But if I go to the lower subdivision level, shift D to go down to the lower subdivision level, you can see how the details for this is not very obvious anymore. Now if I try to kind of smooth now with the intensity of 100 on this, you can see how with just one stroke we have that completely erased. But when we kind of increase the subdivision level, we notice that on a higher subdivision level, we still have traces of the details we sculpted in there, actually there. So if we smooth this in here again, we go a bit higher. You can see how it's kind of gradually kind of smoothing this out and kind of giving us a different effect on this subdivision level. So you have to keep in mind the subdivision level you're kind of doing your smoothing on, because based on that will kind of greatly affect the visual look of that particular detail you're sculpting on. So you have to kind of keep that in mind. Very, very important. Okay, so now we have other brush in here. We have the clay brush, which does something slightly different from the others. And smooth this in. We have the clay builder brush. You can smooth this out. So depending on the brush you're using, the effect should be slightly different. So I advise you kind of go in there and then try different brushes. So we have the move brush. So if you go to the lower subdivision level, we can actually move this a bit gradually. It's kind of get a more smoother effect with this. But if you have this all the way to a higher subdivision level and you kind of move this, you notice that the transition is not as fast as moving this in a subdivision level that is actually lower. So just kind of make sure you kind of keep that in mind. We're kind of using or working with the ZBrush tools in here. You have to also be mindful of the subdivision level you're on to kind of control how you want this model to kind of react based on the brush you're using. Okay, so we also have the trim brush. Also have the trim. This particular brush is more specific for hard surface modeling sculpting in here. So to kind of go to your brush palettes, kind of see some other brush to kind of use or experiment with, just hit the B on the keyboard. Then you should have various set of brushes in here that you can use and work with. So I advise you to kind of go in there and then try some of them to kind of see how they work. Okay, so yes, so let's go to polyframe on this. So Shift F, go to polyframe on this. Let's talk about some of the polyframes you have in here. Let's go about some of these polyframes. So I'm just going to take this down subdivision level 2. So if you go to our poly groups, let's do an auto group on this. Let's do UV group. Let's do auto group with UVs. You can see how this is kind of creating poly groups based on the UVs for this, and this has a lot of UVs, which is kind of unnecessary. But just to show you guys that it's actually working though. Just to show you guys that this is actually working. Then let's try the group by normals. Okay. Let's say for example now we want to kind of create our own set of poly groups in there. So let me go to the lower subdivision level for this. So I will delete the lower subdivision level. I will delete the higher subdivision level for this. Let's just leave this at this particular subdivision level. So let's say we want to kind of create our own subdivision level. So to go to the maxing tool instead of ZBrush, all you have to do is just click on the control. Then this is going to change this. This is going to change up into the maxing tools or maxing brush rather. So you have the max circle. Select this now. Still holding down control, you can drag out a circle like so. Let's say for example now I want to move this circle upward. I'm not going to move it up. So to do that, just hold down the space bar. Still holding down the control key. Hold down the space bar. We can move this maxing upwards. Let's say if I release the space bar now, you can see resize this again. Let's say I'm satisfied with the size. I can now drag this up here, holding down the space bar and just put this in here. So now I have a max in there. Let's go out of polyframe. Alternatively, if you want to kind of subtract from this max, hold down control, drag a max, hold down space bar, move this to the center like so. Release the space bar. Now you can hold down the alt key to invert that max. Then we can release this. You can see how this kind of subtracts from that max. Okay, so let me undo that. Same also goes with the various set of maxing tools in here that I would kind of advise you to kind of try and then play with. You have the max pen curve, we have the max lasso, we have the max pen, we have the max perfect circle, we have the max rectangle, we have the max square. I advise you to kind of go in there and then try most of that. But keeping in mind that this alt and spacebar function we just talked about in here actually works for each and every one of those maxing brushes we have in there. So let's say for example now we're going to give this particular max a poly group of its own. We can come to the poly group in here and we can click on group max. That kind of give this max region a separate poly group. Okay. So now we still have this max in. So let's say we want to kind of remove this entire max for this. We can just hold down the control key and just drag a selection outside the canvas. On the canvas rather, not on the object. So that will kind of remove our maxing for us. But we still have our poly group in there. So our poly group is still definitely in there for us to work with. Okay. So let's say for example, okay, since we're in here, let me just show you guys some of this other maxing in here. So we have I don't think I use this pen maxing that often, this curve pen. I mostly use this max lasso, max pen, perfect circle, not very much, max rectangle a few times, max square, not very much. So let's start with this max lasso. This max lasso actually allows you to draw out where you want the maxing to be. Then the max pen actually allows you to kind of by hand paint in where you want the max to be. Okay. Then we have this max. This is a max perfect circle. This is particular will actually draw a perfect circle for you. So you can just drag this perfect circle to wherever region you want this to be. Though, yes, keeping in mind, depending on the resolution of your model, that kind of creates a specific or kind of refined circular shape, or it's kind of blur that out. Now it's blurring this out because it's not giving us a perfect circle, because this the poly count for this model is not high enough to kind of hold a much refined or sharper edge for that circular shape. So you also have to kind of keep that in mind. Okay, yes, we have the rectangle. We have the rectangle for this. Okay, you see how this draws rectangle. Let me just remove everything and draw this out again. See how this goes? This goes across the model. Okay. So now let me give this a difference. Let's mark this out. So a shortcut kind of create a poly group from this max is to click on Ctrl W or Ctrl W. Kind of give that a separate poly group. So now how do we manipulate this poly group? So let's say for example now I want to kind of isolate just this poly group only. To do that, you have to hold the Control and Shift. That will bring us to a different set of brushes in here. So now this is different set of brushes in here. So we have the select lasso, select rec in here, and we also have the slice circle, slice curve, slice rec, trim circle, trim curve, trim lasso. We also have the clip circle. There are a lot of tools in here, but specifically for now, let's talk about this select lasso and select rec. This particular one actually works for mostly selections of poly groups in here. So let's say for example now I'm just going to isolate this poly group. Hold down the Control and Shift and tap on this poly group. That will kind of isolate this poly group in here. And that's new. There's something here in here also we also need to kind of talk about. Something here we also need to talk about. You can see how this particular one at the other edge kind of fades out when you kind of move around this. To kind of fix that, all you have to do is just go come down in here under display, click on double-sided. So it's going to show this properly now for more rotated views. Alright, so holding down the Control and Shift now, if I click on this poly group, this will kind of invert the selection. You can see how it kind of reveals back the dog, the other part of the dog's body, but hides that particular poly group, circular poly group in there. Now to bring everything back out, just Control Shift again and click on an empty canvas to bring everything back out. So let me just repeat that again. Control Shift and click on this poly group to kind of isolate that poly group only. Now to kind of invert the selection of this poly group. Let's say something like, if I hold down Control and Shift, I kind of drag the selection outside of this. That would also kind of repeat the same function also, instead of clicking directly on the poly group, holding Control and Shift. That was kind of invert the same. That was kind of invert this selection and kind of show us the other parts of the poly group. Let's say we still want to hide this other part of the poly group also. So hold down Control and Shift and click on this poly group. Now you notice that two poly groups now are no longer visible in here. Let's say for example now we want to kind of see these other poly groups that are not completely visible in here. To kind of do that, hold down Control and Shift, drag and draw the selection around here. So that will kind of invert this selected poly groups and kind of show us the poly groups that were not visible before. Same thing also, Control and Shift, drag the selection out here. That will kind of invert that. Control and Shift, drag the selection out here. That will also invert that. Let's say for example now we only want to see just this poly group, just the poly group in here. So Control Shift and click on this. That will kind of hide that. Undo that also, Control Shift. Let's say I want to kind of visualize only this particular poly group. Control Shift and click on this. So I want to invert everything else. Control Shift click, invert that. So now we should have every other thing visible except for this, except for the other poly group that we just did an inverted selection for. So it's kind of tricky, but once you do this a few times, you kind of get the general idea for that. Okay. Okay. So this is just a kind of rough introduction to ZBrush. So I've kind of worked with projects in here. You kind of get a better idea as to how to use some of these other tools. So I'll see you in the next lesson.